Well, disgraced lawyer Sidney Powell just filed a motion in her Georgia RICO case. And let me tell you, friends, it is a doozy. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, disgraced and sanctioned lawyer, who is also now a defendant in a RICO case, Sidney Powell, is no longer filing thoughtful, professional legal briefs in her RICO case in Georgia. What she's filing now read more like comic books. She filed a motion to sever. It's a run-of-the-mill legal motion when you have co-defendants who are all charged together in one indictment, in one case. Some of them will file a motion to sever, which in substance is a motion that says, hey, judge, I want out. I want out of the big co-defendant case, and I want to be tried alone. And there are any number of legal reasons defendants might make a motion to sever. I will say they're rarely successful, and I'm going to leave for another day the legal ins and outs of the law of severance. We're going to be talking a lot about it because there are 19 co-defendants and lots of them will probably file motions to sever. What I want to do today is just highlight a few of the passages from Sidney Powell's legal brief. The case is captioned State of Georgia versus Sidney Catherine Powell, not Sidney Kraken Powell. Of course, she is the one who said, release the Kraken. And here is how defendant Powell starts her brief. Sidney Powell has been practicing law for 45 years in the highest traditions of the bar. She then goes on and on and on as if this is a resume and she's applying for a job, talking about all her experience, her accomplishments, her accolades. She goes on ad nauseum, which translated to English means it'll make you sick. And then at one point, she actually starts talking about the Mike Flynn prosecution. She rails against what she claims is a completely concocted case against Mike Flynn. Now, mind you, the Mike Flynn prosecution has nothing to do with the RICO prosecution in Georgia, but let's not forget, Mike Flynn pleaded guilty twice in federal court in Washington, D.C., to committing federal felonies and was only saved by the abjectly corrupt efforts of Bill Barr and Donald Trump. But Sidney Powell saw fit to throw in how Mike Flynn's case was completely concocted. She then hawks her book, a book that is titled Licensed to Lie. Is that a Freudian slip? Is it projection? Because I think one could observe that she kind of had a bar license to lie. And then Sidney Powell concludes the self-congratulatory portion of her legal brief by saying this: her entire life and career have been built on integrity, the rule of law, and her love of truth and justice. But here's the thing, friends. She forgot to include in her brief what we call contrary authority. For the lawyers listening to this or watching this video, you know what contrary authority is. But basically, if you assert something in a legal brief, in a motion, in a legal filing, and you know there's authority out there, there's information, whether a case or factual information, that directly contradicts what you are claiming, That's contrary authority, and as an officer of the court, and all lawyers are considered officers of the court, we have to do the right thing, whether it helps our case or hurts our case. You're supposed to include contrary authority. But when Sidney Powell says, and I quote, her entire life and career have been built on integrity, the rule of law, and her love of truth and justice, she forgot a little something. Headline, Sanctions Against Sidney Powell Over Trump Election Claims Largely Upheld. And that Reuters article begins, a federal appeals court upheld the bulk of sanctions imposed against Sidney Powell and other lawyers who sued to overturn President Joe Biden's 2020 victory in Michigan. The Sixth Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals found that the allegations of election fraud Powell and others had pushed were baseless, frivolous, or even refuted by their own filings. And a Michigan federal judge, friends, said about Sidney Powell's conduct the following. What Sidney Powell did was, quote, a historic and profound abuse of the judicial process. So, friends, there you have it. Federal judges and federal courts exposing the falsity of defendant Powell's claim that her entire career was built on integrity, truth, and justice. And here's another problem with defendant Powell's legal brief. At the very beginning of it, she makes this breathtaking assertion. Sidney Powell has no substantive connection with any other defendant regarding the charges in the indictment. No substantive connection with Rudy Giuliani or Donald Trump. Does she think we didn't see the joint press conferences? She and Rudy pushing false claims of election fraud on the American people, trying to corruptly undermine Joe Biden's election win. Does she think that all of that has just been scrubbed off the internet? Nobody remembers that she and Rudy were appearing together, working in concert to try to keep Donald Trump in office unconstitutionally, not to mention unlawfully, and no substantive connection to Donald Trump. She spent time in the Oval Office during those all-important days after Donald Trump lost the election, and Donald Trump was within a pen stroke of appointing her as special counsel to, in substance, try to undermine Joe Biden's win. But she has no substantive connection to Rudy Giuliani or to Donald Trump or any of the other defendants, she claims. You know, these assertions are more befitting of a work of fiction or of a comic book than they are of a serious, circumspect, thoughtful, sober court filing. And you know what, friends? Sidney Powell is going down. She's going to be held accountable in that RICO trial in Georgia. She's going to be tried. She's going to be convicted. She's going to be sentenced. She's going to be imprisoned. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.